Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leadership Locker. This is Rich Cardona, and I got put in touch with this guest from a great friend of mine, Sel Watts, who owns What's Next PX, a HR transformation company of sorts. And she put me in touch with Jessy Grossman, who is the head of a nonprofit called WIM, which is short for Women in Influencer Marketing. And I'm like, influencer marketing. That is absolutely something we have not talked about yet on this show. And I thought it was really important to break down what the hell an influencer is, how they should be categorized, what is an influencer deal, what should someone pay attention to if they feel like they are on the verge of becoming an influencer or literally getting paid for what they're doing, the content that they're creating, the visibility that they're giving certain brands. Is just different. So Jessy has a couple decades of experience in the digital world as an agency owner, as a talent management representative for actors, and she has a podcast. So this is the perfect person to talk to. And she is in New York City. So we were able to get together for, this one's a little bit long. This one's almost an hour. So we got to talking about everything, just all the facets of this industry that so many people don't know anything about because it's so foreign to us and it's almost, looked at in a negative light. So I wanted to dispel any rumors, educate you, educate me. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Here we go. All right, everyone, I'm here with Jessy Grossman. She's out of New York, and she runs a digital agency specifying in influencer marketing. And she also runs a podcast, Women in Influencer Marketing. Now, right here as we were warming up, I told her a little bit about what we did and why this podcast exists, but I think it's really important to kind of start with this kind of area of marketing that I think is completely misconstrued. So I would love if we could start there, and if you could tell us a little bit about what influencer marketing is and what it isn't.
So, our area of focus, of course, is social media influencers. And that spans from, old school YouTube, Facebook, but mostly these days, Instagram and TikTok is huge. So people who are on there have a strong point of view, have a lot to say, or whether it's inspirational, aspirational, and everything in between, who have a sizable audience who's really intrigued by this person because they have this it factor, they have some sort of pull, they have influence. And so from there, my company, which is Women in Influencer Marketing, we're actually a nonprofit. And we are a networking organization specifically for the industry side of those who work in influencer marketing. So who does that encompass? That encompasses ad agency folks, PR folks, brands, of course, talent managers. There's a lot of tech companies in the space. And it's a great community that we've built across, like you mentioned, a podcast. We have a really thriving private Facebook community. And we have a premium membership that's launching very soon. And it's just a place where we can all share information because as much as this industry has been around now for, 10 plus years, in the grand scheme of things, it's still very new. There's still tons of questions. In a year like 2020 in particular, we're all trying to figure out what the heck we're supposed to be doing with, the social issues, the economic issues. It's really heightened time. So to come up with an effective advertising campaign can be really difficult these times. So that's what our community does. And we provide the resources to help the women in our community do their work better.
Now, let me ask, let's start at the base level is how I like to think about it. Who is an influencer? Who deems someone an influencer? If I see someone on Instagram or LinkedIn and they consider themselves an influencer, how much attention should I pay to that? And you mentioned TikTok. Is that gentleman who was on the skateboard listening to Fleetwood Mac who went absolutely ridiculous viral? Is he an influencer now because of that one video? So how does it kind of work in terms of categorizing and anointing, so to speak, someone who has legit influence on an industry or a product?
So really good question. And I saw that same video popped up like first on every time I opened the app, that
I
guy on the
know.
skateboard.
I saw it the day it came out before it went
Yeah.
ballistic, and I was like, it was
Yeah.
so enjoyable to watch. I don't even know how to explain it.
So I guess he had influence, right? A lot of people on the internet have influence, but what really tests their longevity is, if they can maintain that influence over a long stretch of time. If you look at that specific guy, and I haven't even proofed this concept, but I feel pretty strongly that if you look at his TikTok, and if he has, let's say, millions of views, if that was the only one video that was interesting, he'd probably only have, maybe a few thousand followers. But if he had a whole library's worth of really interesting content going back a while, all of those people who viewed that video, a majority of them would probably convert into followers versus just views, just passing by. So when it comes from a brand's perspective, which is, the people who are spending thousands and thousands of dollars activating and partnering with these influencers, they're looking for influencers who have an audience that stuck around for a while, where there's real true influence there, because it's not just a one time shout out into an echo chamber. It's somebody who is consistently putting out influential messages and influential things out into the world. And it's like a TV show. They come back, they tune in, they want to check in and see what's going on that station.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you as far as the consistency aspect of it all. Now, if someone is on social media because they believe they have a message that they want to be heard, or they just want to help one person, and they're not necessarily looking to be an influencer, but all of a sudden, wow, like 100 views turned into 1,000 views. And now people are DMing me, not just commenting. People are thanking me for this information. At what point should I, if I'm someone who is a creative or someone who has a business or who has a product, think about contacting someone about leveraging my brand? Or is it the other way around? Do you wait for the brands to come to you, and that's when you've quote unquote arrived?
So that's a really good question. It's like the chicken before the egg question. So when it comes to, let me start here. Influencers can have all kinds of different careers, and there's only one version of that in which they work with brands, because influencers, people who are online doing, cultivating a community, can have a number of different revenue streams. And so I think that that's very important to say off the bat. But if their goal is to align themselves with some big brands and promote products, and that is one of the most lucrative sides of the industry and being an influencer, then there's a very particular way that they go about it. But to your question about, do I reach out to brands first, or do I wait for them to come to me? I mean, this is just a fundamental life question. I just firmly believe that I personally haven't been someone who sits around and waits for people to come to me. That's gotten me very little in life. But by pursuing, things that I want very intentionally and mindfully, that's the way to get them. So you gotta get yourself in front of these brands, express interest, let them know how much you love their products and why you are a fit for them, why your audience is an audience where that would buy their products, and then why now. We talk about this a lot in the group. I used to do this, think about this a lot more when I had my own agency, where we represented social media influencers. But we talk about the pitch itself, and we actually have a casting service as part of WIM. So I'm consistently seeing, the 100+ management companies in our organization respond to these brand proposals, right? Where the brand is like, I'm looking for an influencer who fits X, Y, and Z spec. Who do you have? And, some of them are really artful in their pitch, and some of them are just like this person.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just have to think from the other end, what's so compelling? You got to make a really good pitch. And so whether it's from an agent or a manager who represents an influencer or the influencer themselves, just thinking very specifically how to have yourself stand out. And there has to be something special there and compelling. And I think that's really important to note.
I think that's the easiest thing to overthink because you can go in so many different directions. And all of a sudden, if you're observing your direct competition, so to speak, if I am trying to appeal to a clothing brand and I'm trying to make something unique about myself, and all of a sudden I look, I'm like, wow, everyone's doing that. I'm not that sharp. I'm there's nothing too different. I want to ask with that, where do you see the balance of kind of storytelling in addition to just being unique in general, maybe visually appealing or just creative in general? But does storytelling, play a part in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the skilled part of it. When we talk about what really makes an influencer versus somebody who just happen to have a funny day on the internet. That's somebody who is a real true influencer and a real professional in this industry. So yeah, telling a story, really important, but also connecting the dots, right? So that's really what a talent manager does. But every influencer should have a significant period of time, in my opinion, where they don't have a manager, where they really learn the ins and outs as an entrepreneur themselves. Because fun fact, once you get a manager, like your job still isn't over. You still have a lot of work to do. The manager just supports it, but that's another topic we can chat about later if you like. But yeah, when you're pitching yourself as an influencer, it's really about connecting the dots. It's not just thinking about your brand, and it's not even just thinking about the other brand. It's thinking about how is this a great partnership? And again, it's like, why me, but also why now? Why us? And really being able to articulate that, you gotta realize that the brand is going to have its very specific goals if they're going to be, cutting you a paycheck here. So, their goals are anything from, selling product to brand awareness to a lot of things in between. And I think it's important to just recognize, what do they need out of this equation? How can I help them achieve that? And of course, recognizing that it's not necessarily you, it could be your content, perhaps, if they just want to repurpose it. But much, much more often than that, it's about your audience. And so really understanding the analytics and the demographics of who is following you, who's the most engaged, who do you convert into paid customers, age-wise, location-wise, gender, and all of the platforms give you that data, coupled with just maybe surveys you run on your own, questions that you ask in your stories to just really better understand your audience, because they are absolutely hand in hand with your brand.
Thank you. Now, as you were saying that, I immediately got to this place where, and I wrote it down and it's so horribly written, but I can read it. It says, how does someone focus on the end user? So we're talking about the brand and we're talking about the person, but the end goal is, as you said, to kind of form a partnership. Why does this make sense? And the reason it would make sense is because ultimately it potentially influences buyer behavior of the product or service that you're selling or whatever it may be. But if I am someone who's now in a position to potentially be an influencer and I have been completely focused on putting value-added content or whatever it may be, and I'm thinking about the person at the end, how do I avoid making it about me when all of a sudden I might be talking to big brands and now maybe I'm making a lot more money. This is a dream come true. And here I've arrived and I've lost focus. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that. And I'm actually, maybe that's the question. Have you seen that? And what would you do to avoid that?
Sure. So, I think that the one thing I would recommend to anybody who really wants to get into this is to just stay focused. It can be really easy to get all like starry-eyed about this industry and like also just very maybe overwhelmed with the amount of possibility, potential, partnerships coming your way or not coming your way, but the dream that they could be. There's so much. It's, it's funny. When we're actually doing, we have a lot of events, and one of the events that we're doing is just about like burnout. It's about, how to balance this all. I've said many times that it's like it could be a pretty manic industry. Social media in its core can be, I don't know if you happen to catch that recent Netflix special, The Social Dilemma.
I haven't, because I feel like it'll make me get off of my phone for 2 days, and then I'll just be right back on doing everything the same again.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'm really interested on what you saw.
Yeah. I mean, we did a whole podcast episode on it. A lot of people have, talked about it. I've heard lots of other podcasts, YouTube videos, et cetera, on it. Not to get too deep into that, but it proves the point that we all pretty much know already, which is just that in like social media is, it can be very overwhelming. It can be all encompassing. And like you wake up in the morning, first thing in the morning, what do? You're on your phone through the nighttime. And imagine if you're doing that for a living. So there's a lot of really important topics that we try to consistently talk about in WIM to just stay on top of that. And just mental health is really important. Burnout is real, whether you're an influencer yourself and having to constantly create engaging content. I mean, you have a podcast yourself,
That's funny you say that. I wrote a post today on LinkedIn. I felt pressured to post today. So all I'm going to say is I'm having a great day and I hope you have a great week. I mean, that's all I wrote. And I'm just like, that, or I'm going to scrounge, to just put something that probably does no good. And I mean, I really feel like there's so much pressure out there. And I really very much agree with what you're saying, that the ability to burn out, especially if you haven't really caught any traction yet, that burnout can ultimately lead to you not following through on something that could have been.
Yeah. Whether you've got success already and you're just chasing more success, which, can be dangerous, right? Like when are you ever going to reach that success? Are you ever going to stop and smell the roses? Or if you haven't experienced it yet, when do you, how far do you go? How long do you try? Are you trying the right things? Are you pivoting? Are you listening enough? If you're an influencer, you are dependent on a lot of things that are far outside of your control. One of the many examples, just the algorithm of Instagram, YouTube, all the different social platforms. You can't control that algorithm and the ever-changing nature of those platforms. And so, maybe for a while, something is working for you. I've experienced this in our group. Something's working really well for you and you're getting all this engagement and you're so excited and you're all motivated. And then nothing on your end changes except all the engagement goes away. It drops and you're like, what do I do with this? and you're going to have to do something because you want that engagement back. But the answer of what to do isn't always so clear because again, it's things outside of your control. So it can be draining. It can be exhausting. And I'll tell you, when one of the first questions you asked me today is like, what are the common misconceptions about influencer marketing? One of them is that, it's the easiest thing. You're just taking selfies all day and like you making all this money and you're living the life and it's easy. I can tell you firsthand from representing influencers for years to now working with industry professionals to just our personal branding. It is one of the most difficult things you could ever sign yourself up for, actually. So it's very different.
Well, and then representing them is probably even harder because you have skin in the game. So they're relying on you to help keep that going, I'm assuming. So that I'm really glad you pointed that out. And one thing I wanted to say about the algorithm, so Gary Vee has this line where he's like, there is no algorithm because it always changes. There is no algorithm. So don't play like there's an algorithm, but I've seen it, there was a month, like last year, I think there was this like month where my Instagram stories were like exploding. I was like, is this this is fantastic. Like, I've never seen this kind of traction, and then it goes away. Right now, if you're on IG Reels, like, it's probably a good idea. You're probably going to get more reach because platforms push what they want you to use. But I completely agree with that. I want to ask you this. Back to the concept of an influencer. I think there's two camps of people, and there's people who understand what it is, people who gravitate towards it, those influencers out there who are quote unquote authentic, always bringing value, like The Rock, right? He just hit 200 million, I believe, followers or something like that. Like, people were like, this guy should be president. There's that camp of people who look at influencers in a certain light. And obviously that's a larger than life example. There's many kind of on a different rung, so to speak. But then there's the other camp who, again, use that word, that term, that market as a place to quote unquote demonize social media. And it's so funny. I was filming a client the other day, and a woman, as we were filming, and we were in a public place, so I couldn't get upset, but she goes, social media is the devil. I mean, plain as day in the middle of us recording. I was like, thank you. But there's two camps of people. So if you have the capacity to influence and, work with someone like you and get my brand out there and help brands and help people, how do you respond to not only just, we already talked about the pressure, but how do you respond to the negative people out there who are in that camp of, this is exactly what's wrong with social media. This person is just indulgent and here they are. And how do I tell my friends I'm an influencer?
Yeah, I don't play to those people. I just think that you're never going to please everybody. And I don't know. And there's only so much energy that a person can expel in a day. And this shit is already so hard. So it makes no sense for me to convert those people. That's not sort of the business that I'm in. I want to convert the people who I've got hooked, and who maybe, they love the content, but it's like, how do I get them to actually make a purchase? How do I get them to tune into my TikTok if I'm predominantly on Instagram? I always say, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So it's also about just utilizing what you've got and building upon that versus basically starting completely fresh to try to influence someone who is just, they're not your people. They're not the audience that you want to go after. That's going to be a really big uphill battle. And I just don't think it's worth it.
I agree. My next thought is about breaking onto social at this point. In my opinion, and this is why I specialize in LinkedIn and my clients have done very well, but I'm already kind of anticipating like that cliff to, that to fall off a cliff at some point, meaning, if you're not there early enough, then it's really not going to happen. So if I am someone who has a specific talent, can probably build a community, I still believe the uphill battle of gaining or, garnering a following on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. Well, maybe not TikTok. TikTok, it's possible, but these people want to exist everywhere, and you work in across all these industries and have obviously expertise on these platforms. How should people approach it? I know there's always go to where your audience is, but if I don't have an audience yet, where would you say you should begin, or how to approach it without trying to boil the ocean, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think that, I hear the question a lot, which is, can I even start now? Am I late to the game? Is there room for me? And just my experience, the answer is yes. And there's absolutely space for you. And I'll tell you, it's just from personal experience. It's not really conjecture. It's that like every couple years or every few years, especially, it seems like there's like a new crop of exciting influencers. And I don't know, I'll only speak personally. I just go, I sort of get bored of people every so often. I feel like brands and just everybody is sort of the same. Like if sometimes some of the influencers who who are incredibly successful are brilliant because they can constantly keep it fresh, but that is rare to be able to do. They start to sort of feel a little stale, and you're like, all right, I got that, or I've just I'm in a new stage of my life. And so maybe when I was young and just concerned about like fashion and lipstick, like I'm not so into that anymore. Like now I'm in a new phase of life where other things are more important to me. And that influencer doesn't really talk about that anymore. So I think that there's absolutely space for new people coming up. It's a matter of how to get to a sizable following in a reasonable amount of time so that you can kind of skip that terrible phase, which is that, you're creating incredible content theoretically, but nobody's really seeing it. So how do you grow? And how do you get your great content to the right people? And there's a lot of strategy in that, of course. We talk about that in the consulting that I do for sure. But to give you a little bit of a teaser for what that could look like, it's about collaborating with people who already have a following. It's making sure that you're bringing constant value, and that could be in any sort of capacity. Like if you're a fashion blogger, bring value in how to style an outfit like you've never seen, and how to wear something in maybe a different body shape or, something. There's so much value to, of course, like I've seen a lot of doctor influencers lately. I saw this video the other day about it. This went viral. Pretty sure it was on TikTok. It was about a dentist who was telling us that we've all been putting the wrong amount of toothpaste on our toothbrushes forever. And in fact, like, it makes so much sense because, of course, the toothpaste companies want you to put a whole big lump of toothpaste on your toothbrush because they want to sell more toothpaste. But as a dentist, he's actually like, no, that's because they want to sell more product. You should actually just put a tiny little dab. You don't need that whole thing. And people's minds were blown. Because, it's value that's being brought. Nobody talks about that. It's just done, but it's done every single day, twice a day, and yet this guy can spend, 30 seconds on a TikTok and like blow your mind. So if you're constantly able to bring value, whether it's, as mundane as how much toothpaste to put on your toothbrush, to, larger things of maybe, how to vote, how to register to vote, and, an absentee ballot and the proper ways to do that. I saw this great Netflix special the other day about voting. And I actually even learned a couple things to make sure that my vote is counted. Just constantly bringing value. You got to talk about stuff that you're enthusiastic and really passionate about, though, because otherwise, there just won't be enough content to create if you're not interested enough in that content too. That's something really important as well.
Look, I've been doing this for 2 years. I'm a retired Marine who went to a corporate job and quit that job after I was like, this is awful. And then I didn't stumble onto this. I poked around at my curiosities until I landed on something. I was like, wow, this is actually a problem I can solve. But what I've seen over the last 2 years is, I don't want to say it's a shift, but it's very tangible that the more educating you can do, the better it is. You just mentioned the dentist. I have a friend who's a plumber, and he's been on YouTube for a couple years, and this year it just caught. And he exploded. I'm talking like 50,000 new subs a week, 1 month, 6-figure months off of, AdSense and just all kinds of things. So I'm like, okay. And he's a plumber. And all he's trying to do is influence people that, in a way that the trades are still fair game and that you can make a good living in the trades. There's a lot of educating. Where are you on that? And what you should be educating people on? Because I think there's a part of us that knows what we could talk about with our eyes closed, but then there's also kind of a need in the market to be educated on a certain subject. So where should you lean if I'm an individual? Where I know a little bit about, or where I know everything with my eyes closed?
I mean, I don't know. I'm always one for education. Again, I think that it's just knowing your audience. At Whim, for example, we're pretty split. I would say, and we've asked this question of our group pretty often. It's like, what types of events do you want us to do? Do you want us to do more educational events, or do you want us to do more networking events? They cater to very different people. Some people who are, wanting to constantly educate themselves are those who are just a little bit more cerebral. And those who want to network are like the social butterflies of the world. And so it's like, what do we do? Because there was a recent post where I just asked everybody, which is important. Just ask your audience if you're wondering. You'll get really incredible information if you do that. And we did. And it was pretty much split 50-50. Which, is that helpful? I mean, any information's helpful. It'd be more helpful if it was, skewed one way or the other. But it just depends on your audience. And this is something important to keep in mind. So, like, what do you do if you get mixed messages like that? Like, if one post, the information that you get back is pretty split. Ask on different platforms. Ask it, like, let's say on Instagram. Instagram is a beautiful example. You've got types of audience that's looking at your stories. You have a different type of audience that's looking at your feed. You have a different audience that is looking at your reels and discovering you in different ways. And that's all on one platform, right? And so, I was talking to my boyfriend the other day, and I was like, because he's in a lot of private Facebook groups as well. And I was like, how do you consume that content? And he was like, well, I usually just go to that group and I will just scroll. And I'm like, that's so interesting. I very rarely do that. I usually go to the bottom. If we're talking about the app, I go to the bottom. It's like, I think it's a third button from the left where it's the feed of all your groups. Because I'm like, this is just a curated feed of all the groups that I subscribe to. And so I just sort of do it that I consume all the groups at once versus going into one individually. And then of course, like it's like, okay, well, then that means as an owner of a private Facebook group, I just need to post more often, because I was thinking if I post an announcement at the top of the Facebook group, everyone's seeing it because it's the first post and it's pinned there. But if you consume the content the way that I do, you're actually not always seeing that post because you're just seeing it in the feed.
Yes. Well, I do what you do. I go to groups. It's on that bottom row, and then I just click on the groups that I know. I mean, otherwise, I just know I'm going to see on my regular feed stuff that's, I don't know, potentially irrelevant, right? Just like friends, updates, and all that other stuff. I want to, if I'm in this marketing group and that marketing group and this impact theory group or whatever, I want to see what's going on there. So I consume the same way. It's really funny that you say that. I am looking here at your areas of expertise. And digital talent representation, digital marketing, production, of course, but there's digital IP deal structure. So I'm now an influencer. I now have a brand. I now have a following, and now I'm getting approached, or I've approached people. When it comes to this deal structure, can you talk to me about things that people should know when they're going into it? Do they need someone to represent them? Do they need a management company? Do they need a lawyer? How should they pursue this in a way that's going to be not lopsided, so to speak?
Yeah, well, that is a great question and something that's hugely important. So, let's move away from, trying to get a brand deal, and let's go to this really pivotal point where you've got one, right in front of you. There are a ton of things that need to be looked at, and to make sure that, like you said, it's not lopsided, that it's mutually beneficial for all the parties involved. And there are very specific terms in an agreement for an influencer deal that are different from any other deal that that talent could be working on. And so by just hiring, any old lawyer or family friend or, a husbander or a momager who's going to look and review a contract for you, that person just is absolutely not going to know what they need to know in order to make sure that you're not going to get burned signing this contract. However, I will tell you that when I was managing talent more often and had my own agency, that when we would be in talks with influencers who were not represented prior to speaking with us, I would say at least 9 out of 10 were like, oh, I just never even reviewed the contract. Like, I just signed it. I always just signed it. You know how much stuff I've got going on? I got to create content for the next week. I've got to create my video and my this and my that. Like, I don't have time to do that. Like, I just want the money. And I'm like, okay.
What did they miss in the contracts then that we should know about?
Right. Oh my gosh. So what did they miss? I will tell you one of the most important things one of the many important things to review, talking about exclusivity. So, wonderful that you want to make $10,000, let's say. Oh my God, how exciting it is that somebody is offering me $10,000. But if that includes exclusivity, okay, let's start from the beginning. Let's say that you are, I don't know, I keep using this. Well, let's change it up from fashion.
Can I give you an example?
Yeah.
The plumber guy, right? He got approached by Cottonelle.
Yes.
And they're like, dude, we would love for you to make a video on why our stuff should flush, right? But then maybe there's, I have no idea, brand B or something like that. Maybe that's a good example.
It is a great example because that's his shtick, right? Like that he's got, one main topic that he talks about. It's not like he's a lifestyle influencer and he talks about his day, he talks about that. So, yes, Cottonelle makes so much sense that he would partner with. However, let's say brand B comes around and they're offering double what Cottonelle offered. But if he signed that contract for a shiny $10,000, he's going to absolutely miss out on the $100,000 deal if that contract included some very, very specific exclusivity. And exclusivity, for people who are listening that may not know what that means, exclusivity is just saying, I'm exclusively working with this brand, and that brand doesn't want to share you with a competing brand. So an exclusivity term would include, in this instance, no other toilet paper brands, or it could be far more expansive than that because, of course, they're just looking out for themselves. So maybe, no consumer goods brands, or, something super broad, super broad that would exclude you from future deals. So I think that's one of the many, many things that are included in a contract that's worth looking out for. Because again, as exciting as it is to get $10,000, a manager will look out for, the future deals that you're potentially missing out on as well.
Excellent. Well, I have two more questions. And one is one I am obsessed with. When people approach us, I get this question when I listen to other marketers and prominent marketers. This is a conversation that always comes around. And it is, what is the ROI? So if I am an influencer and I get approached and they're going to pay me that $10,000 that you expected, I'm assuming that most traditional brands are going to expect something out of it. And that ROI might be in terms, it might be lead gens, it might be impressions, it might be whatever it may be. How would you categorize the importance of it? Because I just feel like there's the quantitative piece, but then there's a qualitative piece that often gets missed. So what is the ROI conversation that you've experienced when it comes to what an influencer should be able to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's be real. I mean, the brands are paying these, huge amounts of money. So I'd be pissed if I was them. I wasn't getting ROI. There are a lot of influencers out there, or even managers who, will say, oh, it's just about, brand awareness and, stats schmats. Like, I don't have to, like the algorithm changes there's like excuse after excuse after excuse. Maybe because I'm a little more removed from it now. And again, like WIM is just very agnostic in that we support women who work in all capacities in the space. But look, I'm most concerned about the longevity of our industry. And so from that perspective, if we don't have a focus on ROI, it just loses legitimacy of our industry. And so with that being said, I think that one of the first conversations that needs to happen is, what ROI are you looking for? There should be ROI, of course, but that looks different depending on strategy. And that's where more senior folks come into play, where it's really educating them on, all right, let me take a good snapshot of your brand, of your goals. And now we can really identify and get strategic about what we're looking to achieve here. That could be so many different things depending on the brand. A small brand is probably going to be most concerned with moving product. And a larger brand is going to be maybe more concerned with, getting followers, or again, like brand awareness, expanding an email list. Because, at that point, you're not necessarily going to sell a product upon impression one, but you've now maybe gotten that consumer into your funnel. And now that they're in your funnel, impression 5, 6, 20 may be what is actually necessary to convert that person. And so, marketers who are really experienced understand that process and understand that most of the time it takes time to be able to convert a person into a paid customer. But that ROI and the goals that are for that campaign or that partnership need to be expressed. And then the influencer needs to say, that also aligns with my audience and what I can produce for you. And it goes back to just like doing business 101. Everybody's got to talk to each other, communicate with each other, and make sure everyone's on the same page.
Got it. And they have a contract that they agree with and that does not necessarily have exclusivity if that's not what they desired. So last question is WIM. So how did this come about? I mean, you have years and years of industry experience. You had your own agency, and then WIM came about, or I don't want to say came about, but you have this nonprofit now. What led you to that route? And obviously you were compelled to do it, but was there a moment that you're like, I have to do something more? And what triggered that?
Yeah, so WIM has always been, it started out as a passion project for me. It started out about 5 years ago when I was very early on. I used to represent actors in commercials at a very large talent agent, very old school, large talent agency. And I started their influencer division there. They were representing influencers, and I saw that there was something there. It sort of aligned with their commercial department of that it's commercial endorsement deals. And the rest was sort of history. And when I was starting out, I knew that there was something there, but I didn't necessarily know how to do it because it was so new. And so I was just personally looking for a community that I could go to and ask questions and meet other people who were in the same boat, and we could share information and make our work better. And so that was how WIM was born. It was a conversation. I'm a big networker. I love to meet new people. I mean, you're probably the same way. I feel like any podcast hosts that your format is, conversations like these, like you're inquisitive. You like to meet people. You like to learn things. So, yeah, absolutely. Right. And it's fun. So I was out at breakfast with someone and I told her, I was like, this is my idea, coupled with the fact that I've always been really passionate about women in business. So we decided to just make it a women's focus group. And I was like, I have a name, Women in Influencer Marketing, when it's shortened as an acronym is WIM. And I think it sounds like women. And I don't know, is that silly? What is that? Is this anything? And she was like, I like it. Let's just use both of our networks and our companies and let's do an event or something. And we did. And, within a couple years down the road, after many events and starting a Facebook group and a podcast and all these things, we became official by registering it as a nonprofit. And we're a 501c4, which is a networking organization. then COVID happens, and arguably it's been a more important resource for our members than ever before because, we have a job board. And in addition to the job board, we have a community. I don't know. I ask people frequently in the group, I'm like, what do you get the most value from in the group? Because we have a lot of different services and everything. And the community aspect of it is huge. I think it's the ability to network with other people who are just like you, going through similar things, and like the power of meeting other people who are going through the same struggles and who want the same achievements. It's just a really powerful thing. So we're really excited about we're launching a premium membership in the next month or so, and just really taking it to the next level. It's really exciting.
That's great. We'll definitely make sure to link to that. And I just want to ask a follow-on to that, Jessy, which is you were talking about the community and how it started, and this was a passion project. I mean, it all starts it seems like all these things always start at a lunch conversation or a breakfast conversation, and you just kind of put it out into the universe. Because this is a podcast geared towards entrepreneurs or aspiring business owners, and it could be nonprofit as well, what was it about you that said, this is completely possible? I mean, is it that one piece of validation, that one support that you were like, okay, like I'm going after this? Or was it the potential to live, I could be assuming here, but a little bit more autonomously, like this is mine, I'm creating it. What was it that allowed you to make the passion into something that actualized?
Well, it's been a long process is the real answer. I never want to like romanticize these things. I listen to a lot of podcasts that it sounds too good to be true. And if you're a real entrepreneur, you know that like there are probably more stressful days than not. And there's more, it's not as glamorous as people make it seem.
It's good stress though. It's better stress than the stress I was dealing with. I mean, to me.
Yes, I hear that. And I agree. I worked a corporate job, many corporate jobs too. And yes, absolutely. It's been a long process. Again, like this has been about 5 years in the making. I've had other companies as well, all in the influencer space. I think that what really confirmed that I've been onto something and that it's something that I want to continue to pursue is the reaction from other people, where people just privately message me and thank me for, putting this together and for having this group exist in the first place. And to know that I'm like really helping people and really making a difference in people's lives. Like, fun fact, I have a BFA in theater. Like I no one taught me how to run a business. No one, that was not my education. If I could do it again, I'd probably do it differently. I really respect people and admire people who have been fortunate enough to have, a business degree or, all these things. Again, I'm very passionate about education. But I don't have that. And so when I sort of had the ability as an adult to really have a career that makes an impact with people and just really actually changes people's lives, I can't not do that. Like I have to do that because especially in a year like we're having this year, you got to follow where the good is. And the amount of resources that we provide, it's just a really special thing, the community that we built. So when these people reach out and they're like, oh my gosh, like, thank you. I'm like, no, but seriously, thank you. Because this group wouldn't be anything if I was just yelling into an echo chamber. It's,
I'm so happy you said that, because one thing I've been trying to push, at least with my audience where they are, is there's plenty of posts that I make that have there's nothing special about them. The metrics are pedestrian, but what people don't see, and the metric that is not displayed, is that inbox message that you get, exactly like you said, that I'm grateful for this, or thank you for this, or because of this podcast, or because of this video that you made, this happened. And then of course that feeling of gratitude is now 360, because no, you're like, thank you. You listened. I put something out there, you listened, and it helped. So that reinforces the fact that what we're doing is viable and something we should continue. So I really appreciate that comment, and I'm glad that's exactly how you feel. So I just want to say thank you so much for being on, and I want to make sure people can find you on wherever you want to be found. So where can people find you, and a little bit more about WIM?
So, the best way to get in touch, we've got it, whether it's the organization, it's iamwim.com. That's I am WIM, women in influencer marketing.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you'd like to just connect with me personally, it's Jessy Grossman, and Jessy's with a Y. Those are probably the easiest ways to connect. And I can't impress it enough. Like, I'm a huge networker. So I love connecting with new people, whether they're, new to influencer marketing. We need more people like you. So don't be afraid to reach out and to experienced people who are just looking to do better business or just want to connect. So I love when people reach out. So please do.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to Jessy and I. Again, you could find her at Women in Influencer Marketing. Google it, you will find her, and that's also the name of the podcast. Reach out to her if you have any questions. Again, if she provided you any value and I provided you any value through our conversation, please consider taking a couple minutes to rate and review this podcast so that more people can enjoy it just like you did. Thank you so much for listening to us, and we will see you in a couple days. Bye.